Just a quick message to say that this video has been very kindly sponsored by WePrint Miniatures. They have a catalogue of thousands of 3D printed miniatures, and if you would like to buy any, you can get 10% off using the code in our description. Thank you, and enjoy the video.
Hi, I'm Peachy.
Hi, I'm Jeff. And we've probably, in this hobby, all owned one, painted one, the very least seen one, may even seen the gloriously large one outside Games Workshop headquarters. But have you ever thought about the man that sculpted the first one? Today we're joined by icon, legend, whatever word you want to associate with him. Nothing rude if you don't like games. If you don't like Games Workshop and you don't like Space Marines, keep it to yourself.
No.
But we're joined by Bob Naismith.
Well, good morning, good afternoon.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, how are you guys doing?
We're well, thank you. How are you?
Doing fine. Yes, yeah.
Presence of the mighty Bob Naismith.
Well, it's just good fun. It's a great hobby to be in. You know, whether you're a gamer or a sculptor or a painter or anything, it's just a wonderful thing. It doesn't hurt anybody, and we all have a laugh. And
Yeah. Well, thank you for coming along this morning. We appreciate it. No worries.
Yeah.
So, do you want to start or shall I?
I have an interest in. It's almost like an early journey for me, which was we spoke before we went on the show. I was chatting to our mutual friend Dave Andrews, and Dave said that he worked with Bob on HeroQuest, making the plastic scenery. Dave did the plastic scenery, so that tells me that's how far back in the day that you were sculpting. That's a long time ago, Bob.
Yeah, because even and at that time I was past Space Marines. I'd finished. I'd stopped doing that because
Wow, really?
well, yeah. We were into the whole kind of plastic adventure, you know, and we had that teaming up with Milton Bradley.
Yeah.
And I remember now. Dave will not thank me for this, but basically what happened was that Hasbro down in London said, we want some bits for furniture, and so we designed the bits for the furniture. I don't know if you remember, there was like cardboard cases with plastic tops and bottoms on. So we made the patterns. In fact, Dave, I think, made most of the patterns for them. And then Hasbro said, "Oh, can we have some castings of them?" And we went, because these are quite big. They're all 3-to-1.
Yes,
you know, so they were about a foot long. And we'd never made moulds like that. So I phoned up to our aunties in London and said, send me up a whole load of silicon rubber. And they sent it up. And I gave it to Dave. And I said to Dave, right, you make the moulds. And so he made the moulds and poured the moulds. And that kind of rubber goes off in about 6 minutes, 6 hours, kind of thing. So the next day we came in and it was still like treacle. I said to Dave, did you put hardener in that? He said, yeah. I said, did you stir it? He said, oh, stir it.
Oh, no.
So, what we had then, we said the masters covered in uncured silicon rubber gunk that we had to get rid of and clean it off and then start it all over again. And it was fine at the end of the day. But I always remember us and David, it was an OSH moment, you know, and this was, and how we were going to tell Brian Ansell, you know, and that kind of thing. But we got away with it. So, yeah, I've really fond memories of Dave. He's a good
I can't believe Dave made a mistake.
Well, there you go. Well, he was only about that size at this time.
And he had hair.
Aye, Chewbacca.
So what else did you do on the HeroQuest? So did you do like a lot of the plastic figures?
Helped with a lot of the figures. At that time, plastic was a kind of like played very much second fiddle to the main sculpting exercise, which was for making for metal figures. And consequently, a lot of the designers were either were wanting to get on with making metal masters and not really keen on doing the plastic masters. So consequently, because I was the person who was responsible for the plastics, I had to do quite a lot of the sculpting. Yeah. You know, or finishing them off, you know. So I probably had my hand on all of the models at one point or another, you know, and making them out of this awful stuff. Nowadays, when they make models, they don't even do it like this now, they do it digitally. But originally, we were making the models in an awful earthenware wax-based clay called Chavant. And it's interesting because when people are making the very first Ford Capri or Ford Escort, They have a great big steel chassis that weighs about a ton, and then they just throw this clay on it, and then they have guys who are like grown-up versions of us actually sculpting the car. And they sculpt the car and they can put a finish on it that is shiny. It looks like it's polished. And it's amazing, but it never, ever goes hard. So what would happen is we as sculptors would spend days making an orc or a wizard, and it was perfect. And then we'd have to go for approval, and you'd put it on the table, and guys like Alan Merritt or Brian would say, "Oh, that's really good," and they'd pick it.
Oh my good God!
Oh, that's great. Yeah. We're happy with that. And then they put it back down, and it was all cut. And so then you were days away from getting it back again. You know, but
and it's never going to look the same, is it?
No, it wasn't. That was a one-off.
Yeah,
you know,
soul destroyed.
So there was a lot of that. But nowadays, then they moved on to using green stuff, which is what we used to use.
Yeah,
making sculpts. And we used that for making 3-Ops. But now it's all done with digital and prints.
Yeah,
you know, and then you do elaborate on that. So yeah, things have moved on, but it's still great fun.
It's just mad to think that, you know, I didn't really know. I understood who Dave Andrews was to a certain degree. Then I started working in the company, and I was like, "Oh, you've done this, and oh, you've done that." I had no idea how much impact you and Dave had on my childhood as a hobby. You know, and I think a lot of people would not realise that the stuff that you've done over the years that are just taken for granted.
Yeah. I mean, Dave was a terrier in that respect, because he's just you know, he's a gamer from top to bottom. You know, so that's all Dave really wants to do, and so he enjoys himself. He applied that to a lot of what we do. I mean, I'm consider myself more as a sculptor, maker type person who got into making war games figures and then fantasy and sci-fi. So I was always coming at it from that point of view, but Dave was coming at it from the other end of the tunnel. You know, you know, let's get the figures and get them on the table and get playing. You know. So so it worked well like that. But yeah, I've done all sorts of things. I mean, I was only working at Games Workshop for about 6 or 7 years.
When did you leave?
1990.
So that's mad, because your name was heard a lot in the office, even like when I was there 2008 to 2012, you know, people
well, it's just
thrown around quite a lot. So
there's a lot of things that are again impact, and again it was maybe because the company was small, so it was easier to have an effect. You know, whereas now if you walked into Games Workshop and you were a creative, you might never be seen. You know,
or named.
Yes, or named. You'd just be part of the thing. That's also an interesting thing as well, that Brian at the time was quite keen on making sure that there was a connection between the sculptors and their models, you know. So every figure was credited, you know, sculpted by Bob Naismith, Jez Goodwin or whatever. So there was that rolling ball of awareness, which is now not there anymore.
Because you could tell, couldn't you, who everyone had a style. I could even tell the styles of like certain painters and the painter team. So it's nice. You know, that's a Perry. You can tell that's a Perry.
It's a shame, isn't it? It was like that, wasn't he? People like the way, you know, some people follow a football team and then their favourite player leaves, but they keep following the player wherever they go.
Yeah, that's right.
And I think there was a bit of that with no matter what project people went on, some people just collected miniatures of that sculptor.
Yes.
And there was that thing, you know, I'm a big jazz fan or like yourself or whatever. And people followed miniatures, but now sadly, it's become quite faceless. You know, I think Darren Latham still seems to be able to squeeze out mentioning what he's made, because a lot of the time, because he paints because he's come from being painted to sculptor, he's able to paint to a high level the thing that he's actually sculpted himself, and then manages to be able to squeeze in going, I'm painting this, I sculpted it, you know, and it's and so he manages to get it. But it's a shame, because there's so many great sculptors who now you just don't know who made what.
They're kind of faceless. I don't know, you like Mark Bedford, I don't know if he's even doing stuff now or whether someone else is.
Do you work with Mark as well, did you?
I think Mark came just after I left. You know, but they're super talented. You know, I mean, that's the great thing as well. When I first left Games Workshop in the 90s, there weren't many figure sculptors around. So consequently, a lot of people who wanted figures done would come to me, because there weren't many freelances. And And when I looked at some of the stuff in the 90s from other people, I looked at it, I thought, oh, that's not very good. I'm a bit worried about this, because you could see the hobby was kind of, dwindling rather than getting better. But then it seemed to come back, and there was a resurgence. And now the talent that's there in workshop, God bless them, and elsewhere is just amazing. You look at any of these art stations or any of those things on Facebook or whatever, and it's just jaw-dropping what people are making.
I suppose it's like, in a weird way, escalation, isn't it? Because I remember I always wanted to paint to the heavy metal standards in the magazines, whereas that old 80s style is considered like basic paint jobs now.
Yeah, it's
like high-end painting back in the day.
Yeah.
So I suppose sculpting's like, kind of kept going and going and going.
And that's the other thing I always liked about this hobby, was that there was a real mix, in the sense that you've got people who are role players, the gamers who understand every word in the book back to front, and they'll play the game like it's a complex game of chess. And other people just want to turn up with some beers and digestives and have a nice time. And then you've got people who want to paint the models just to get them on the table. And the closest you'll ever get is like 3 feet away. Yeah. So it doesn't really matter what those figures are painted like. And then you get the other people who want the figures to be gems, to be real works of art, So you've got all those things all combined into what it's great.
It's great that people can be given the same box of plastic miniatures, and their mentality of how they approach it, how they see it, is so completely different to each other.
And I also think as well that I remember in the early days when we went to things like game days and Golden Demons and things, and Mum and Dad would come along with the kids. Yeah. And even Mum and Dad got that there's quite a Zen thing, in the sense that you would buy the little object, you would take it home, you would paint it up, so there was a craft aspect. You would play with it on the table, you would learn the rules, you would get some basic reading and writing and arithmetic skills out of the book. And then when it was all finished, you could put the wee thing back on the shelf or in its box, and it was still there. Yeah. Whereas with computer games, it's transient. Yeah. You don't need the rules, because the computer knows the rules. You're just telling them the figure to go left, go right, shoot that. Yeah. And then when you switch it off, it kind of disappears. But the idea that you have these objects that have a permanence is really attractive, and people who aren't in the hobby get that. Yeah. So I think that's one of the reasons why the hobby is good.
Well, I think that's the wonderful thing about painting something so small, is that even if you're an extraordinarily average painter, the minute that miniature is viewed by somebody that can't do the hobby at all, it becomes a thing of wonder. Yes. How did you manage to do? How did you manage to do that? Yeah. And then amongst other painters, people would barely give your miniature a glance. But when you put it to your family and your friends, and people who don't know anything about it, even they have a wonder. There's a wonder even for them, and I think that's lovely to be able to go.
It's just easy to understand, isn't it? It's that mix of craft and gaming and collecting and knowledge that comes with it. You could argue that if you really got into it, you would learn about geography. Because it's all fantasy, but you're still learning about the basics of moving around. You're learning about, if you get naval rules, you're learning about the elements. All sorts of stuff.
I mean, from my experience as a child, I was dyslexic. I am dyslexic, so I struggled to read. I struggled to understand. But having that thing that you can get excited about and then understand geography, and then go, oh, that's a place I really care about because I painted an Olmsted. It's got a flag, and I really like that. Then starts to reconfigure your brain a little bit, and then you can plan it out. Well, I say plan it out, but you can at least work to a certain point and understand. And it just helped my reading level go up. Just like reading stuff I was excited about. So I mean, I'm probably interrupting all your questions you've got, Jeff, lined up, but
one burning question lined up.
Go for it.
All right, because it's going to have to come. Going to have to talk about it. Space Marines.
All right, okay.
Right. So the first Space Marine that we all know, the one walking forward with his
LE1 thing, yes.
With just you're responsible.
Yes, that's right.
Aye. So I've got a question that sort of leads into other ones, really. So, did you work from, was that design originally a sketch and you sculpted it, or were you left, was that carte blanche for you to go?
No, really, no, there wasn't a sketch. I spoke to Rick Priestley, who was working on the early rules stuff, and we described it, and we talked about things that he liked that influenced him. And then I just went off and made the stuff. You know, in my mind, I had a kind of mix of D-Day US infantry landing on the beaches meets Romans. You know, and probably those were the main directions I was coming at, and then obviously sci-fi. You know, I mean, one thing that's not on those models, which became part of the character later on, were the heavy the carbs, which were added when we started doing the plastic stuff. And so that probably I have to share that. That's not just me.
Yeah,
that was all of the designers together and building that.
Obviously, the Marine has gone through so many iterations since then to how it now looks with the Primaris Marine. And although there is still noticeable, you can still go back to your original one and look at the modern one now, and there is still things there. But did you think, it must be quite nice to have seen how much they go back to what you did when they started to pull the Horus Heresy back in to become, when the Horus Heresy thing, was it?
Brought the beakies out.
The stud shoulder pads and things like that. Was that nice to be seen?
It was nice to see that there was a circle, there was a coherence. In what they were doing, which you understand, because that's what they're trying to build a history. So it's I get that, and it was nice to see it. Nice to see the thing coming back, and just to be refined, because you know, when I was sculpting those models, I would maybe spend I don't know a day, maybe a day and a half making that model, whereas you know that the sculptors and designers who are working now at Lambton will be taking, I don't know, weeks, maybe months refining it. They'll get a print, they'll check the print, they'll check all the movements, and then they'll go back in again and edit it. So it's a different beast now, and it's really nice to see what it can become.
Did you how did you feel when it started, when, for once for a better term, they got flavours, like, you know, when they went, oh, well, Ultramarines have a bit of a Roman thing going on, and the Blood Angels have an element of that as well, and then they go, oh, White Scars are meant to be like Mongolian horsemen, and when it all started to branch off into other little ways, and some of them wore hoods and wore this and that, did you feel, was that a progression you liked, to see them become more characterful, or did you think of them being more the standard?
Well,
GI was more.
That's tricky, because I mean, by that point, I had moved away from Games Workshop. You know, I was just freelancing, so really that was up to them, and not up to me. You could see that, as you know, in the hobby, they wanted to explore offering different looks. And it suited them then to say, okay, these are Crimson Fists and these are Ultramarines. You know, I mean, in its first instance, they were really just colorways. You know, so that was it.
Did you? How do you feel about how they've gone? Marines, because you must still keep an eye on them, I suppose.
It's interesting to see how different people have worked on them and collaborated them. I think a lot of the imagery is fabulous. It's diverse now. You know, it's really beautiful stuff, I think. You know, when you look at most of the models that I can see online, the dynamism and the posing and the anatomy is still pretty good. Good. It works. So no, I'm pretty pleased with the way that they look at the moment.
Well, that's really it's good, that, because I think, you know, if you're responsible for the core look of how something began, and you now look back on it and can still think, I like the way it's travelling. That's
no, I think it's great, and all the vehicles and stuff like that is just it's brilliant. I suppose the only thing is the scale creep that's gone on means that you can't bring out your old Space Marines anymore because they look like children compared to.
Well, I think that when it came, the problem wasn't it? I think they kept making everybody else bigger, didn't they? And that was the shame. It seemed to people forgot they were meant to be 8 feet tall.
Yeah.
And then and I think that but I like the fact that there seems to be a correction. For me, it's not so much height. I think it's the slenderness, which I think is when you look at the new Cadians, they've got reasonable sized heads and hands. Because you worked on Imperial Guards as well, didn't you?
Yeah, the plastics. Yeah. For the main, the twins did the clays again in that awful Shivant stuff. The twins did the clays for that, and I did some of the mods because at that time, the technology is very unforgiving. You're essentially, when you're making a figure, you're making an organic shape, which has then got to be engineered in the same way that a cup might be engineered, or a teaspoon, or a plug, and the steel molds that produce the models are relentless. They will just keep going, and if there are any little snacks or undercuts in them, they'll destroy your figure every single time. So you have to process your models to make sure that they don't have those problems. And in our early days, there was a lot of learning for that. Nowadays, there's software routines and so on that help you. But in those days, you had to just use your eye. So it was tricky, But yes, did the Imperial Guard. Did. The other thing that I did a lot was I was also in charge of the sculptors for a couple of years. And this was a time when we were expanding workshop hugely. And Brian wanted to have maybe 150 or 200 new models every month.
Wow.
Every month. And we had a finite number of sculptors, so there was just no way you could get that from them. So what I used to do was I would say, get the Perry's Space Wars would get pressed, and I'd get the greens back. I'd take them home, and I'd pull all the heads off, and just do head swaps. And I would do that with the dwarves, and I'd do that with the Imperial Army, So that was how we generated all these different models. So although I can't say that I sculpted the Space Dwarves or sculpted the army, because they are the twins.
Yeah.
All the sculpting is the twins. But the actual, the compilation of the models, of some of the models at least, was down to me.
Well, they did that for a while, didn't they? I remember collecting when the Cadians had their major redesign was, I don't know, it was 3rd edition, 4th edition when the Cadians got, and certain specialists were still in metal. I remember having a medic of all 2 miniatures to be able to make one, the 2 different miniatures to be able to make one out of was he had a medic who was in this particular stance, leaning forward like a blood bag. And I remember one day I was painting him and I looked and then realised that the guy with the melter was exactly the same guy. And I thought,
well, they did the officers, it was like 3 different officers, but it was the same pose, just with different weapons.
Yeah,
it makes sense to try to get them in.
But it does its job, and now we're obviously blessed because, if you look at a modern day Games Workshop sprue, there is not a millimetre wasted now. If you can get an extra little piece on it, it's there.
Oh yeah.
And I think some people go, oh well, back in the day, Space Marines, if we use them as an example, were easier to convert because they were much more multi-part, and you go, yes, but there was only ever so many ways you could build them. And nowadays, yes, they force your hand into making your Marine look a particular way. But then when you look at the sprue and how many other things you can swap and change, and a captain, if you wanted to captain with one thing, you had to buy that one. If you wanted to captain with another thing, you had to buy a different one. And now you open your box and all of his options from his data is all there.
Yes.
So I think there is definitely improvements in some ways, and
absolutely. Yeah, I think the workshop have been, I don't know many other manufacturers that have done that. You know, I think they're the ones who kind of developed that idea. You know, I mean, in the old days when injection tooling was very expensive, still is expensive, but it was an expensive process. To make use of the tool space, you were very economical. You know, because literally you had to pay for every single cavity. So every pair of legs, every head, you had to pay money for. And so therefore we stripped it back. And that was why the frames don't look like that now. Yeah. Whereas now, because it's so much of it is done with computers.
Yeah.
You know, they can import all the properties, all the heads, the arms and so on, and then just leave it to the computer almost to say, right, okay, I'm going to fit all of these in. And it does.
Yeah.
Wow. You know.
And even some of the interesting stuff now is that they understand that if you cut it this way, when you put the joins together, you won't be seen because something will be layered over the top of it.
That's right. Yeah.
It's very clever.
It is. It's cunning.
How it's started to go.
Absolutely.
I feel like I spend a lot less time filing and filling in than when I did last time I was in the hobby.
Absolutely. Yeah, and you're right. It's come on leaps and bounds. Since we started making models like that, you know.
Well, I think I've hogged Bob.
That's fine. No, I mean, my conversation is going to go down the journey of Bob Naismith. Where did you start from? Where did it all begin? And then obviously get to the point where you are now, I guess.
How far back do you want to go?
Well, obviously before our start of conversation, we talked about, you know, you worked with Dave Andrews on Hero Quest. It's like, that was, you know, some time into your career, so it was obviously a long time before that.
Well, before that, I was, as a student, I went to art school, studied silversmithing and graphic design. Then I'd already been to a couple of war game shows, historical war game shows. You know, sci-fi was a kind of very much off in the sides, and was fascinated by them. I lived in Glasgow as a kid. I ended up getting involved with a gang of guys who were war game enthusiasts who set up a shop right in the centre of town.
I wonder where that was going to go then.
Yeah. Called War Games Publications. And they were good, you know, and they had this shop in a tiny little garret right in the top of an old office building. It was like Harry Potter kind of thing. And they decided they wanted to get into making toy soldiers. And so it just went from there. So started making, I think I made a samurai, and I was about 20. And then we went on and on and on from there. And then I got involved through them. We made loads of historical stuff. We did Aztecs, English Civil War, Napoleonics. I did not spaceships, I did naval ships, 1-3000. World War II, World War I, Ancients, Napoleonics, made hundreds and hundreds of them. There for a company called Navwar, which I think is still around.
Yeah,
they still sell the stuff. So I did those, and then I left there and joined the crew at Citadel, and had, you know, like I say, I was there for about 6 or 7 years, but what a hoot! It was such fun, you know, really good fun. And we did a lot of really interesting things. And then in 1990, I left, worked for a year in collaboration with Grenadier Models.
Yeah, I've heard that.
But by then, I was already freelancing with lots of other people, so did all sorts of things. Worked a lot with Hasbro and Peter Pan, who don't exist any longer. I made, what did I do? I did, there was a Peter Pan, there was a cricket game they did. Do you remember with the like 54, 60mm?
Oh yeah, I do remember that.
Yeah, that was me.
Oh right.
The Risk when MB started.
Isn't that like a big thing that scooted down?
That's right.
Yeah, I had that. Yeah, we had that owned. Wow.
Did Risk when it was. In fact, I remember saying to Steve Baker at the time, I said, "Why don't you do a historical one where we do Napoleonic figures and it's all about Napoleon?" And then they did that, so I made all the figures. Risk.
Wow.
What else did I do? I did some stuff for Cindy.
You don't seem proud of yourself for some reason.
No. I mean, I enjoyed it. It's very technical. I did some stuff for Cindy. What else did I do? Yeah, lots of game parts and components. Worked for Roger Ford at NPD, and we did the Schwarze Auge, the Black Eye, which is a German fantasy game that came out in the aftermath of like Hero Quest and all that.
All right.
And so made a load of figures for that. Dinosaur games, just all sorts. Corgi. Made figures for Bloody Flowers.
Because they used to do like Corgi would do like would do like a police car, and they'd have like a little police car.
Or James Bond. We did James Bond, an Odd Job. And,
you didn't do them, did you?
Did.
Oh my giddy aunt.
Chitty Chitty Bang Bang. You know the kids in the back of the chair. So yeah,
it's just like trawling through you trolled your way through my trials.
Yes, same reflection.
But it's just, and every time it's been great because you're working with, well, first of all, because you're working with toys and games. It's just fun.
Yeah.
So it's always been good fun, and still enjoy it. So, and the great thing about doing computers now is you can zoom in, because my eyes aren't as good as they used to be. So you can zoom in now and fiddle with stuff and then drop it back down again. So it's good.
Which brings us to, obviously you've got stuff here.
Yes.
We were talking to John from We Print Miniatures, and he said he's just working through your back catalogue.
Yes.
And he's only got to pee.
Yeah. I just said on some stuff, because he said he doesn't want to do these, like the vehicles and stuff, because he likes figures.
Yeah.
So that's fine. But yeah, it's just, it's a hobby that became a job and is still a hobby. So, in an evening when my wife is sitting beside me and she's doing knitting and we're watching Game of Thrones or the football or something, I'm sitting with a laptop sculpting, because I just love it. So
must be nice to be able to sculpt clean.
Yes,
without having a table
without making a mess. It's wonderful. And it takes us back to that thing you were talking about using the same bodies time after time, because as you build a deeper and deeper library of components and parts and figures and heads and weapons, it kind of gets easier to build.
So do you have like a file with like holsters and pouches and bayonets?
Yeah.
Pull that across.
Yeah, you can pull it across, fiddle with it, change it a wee bit. Heads, same thing. Hands, boots.
What about I know a few like there's people out there that do sculpting and like for Patreon, for instance, they do different skins, so to speak. So they have almost like they've done like every possible pose they can think of that makes sense.
Yes.
And then they just go, right, I'm just going to do samurai versions of this, or I'm just going to do elf versions of this. Is that something you do, or do you tend to like?
I tend to like I like to have them done just as a single model. And that's the model. Rather than offering lots of options. I'd much rather offer lots of figures. And let people pick. So like I say, if I tend on my Patreon, I might be offering in a month, like say a set of 10 figures. So there's 10 files, but I don't really expect people to print all of them. They might look at them and say, "Oh, I really like that one," or "I like that one," and print those. But the whole printing thing is again, it's fabulous. It's interesting for me that there are a lot of people in the hobby who are reluctant or maybe a wee bit scared of it, but it's actually it's so easy.
I've become quite fond of 3D prints since leaving workshop, because it started off just getting like some Star Wars figures, because I got a game called Star Wars Legion. I wanted some different poses and some different styles, and yes, you can get bad quality printouts. That does happen, but most of the time, the sources I've been going to have been really good. And We Print Miniatures, they're very adamant.
Oh, yeah, John's good.
It's good quality stuff, and the stuff I've seen here prints out is very nice looking. So yeah, I mean, the thing I always used to find, like, as much as I love the Perrys and I love their sets and stuff, like when they did like dwarfs for Lord of the Rings, there'll be like some dwarf warriors, and there's always like one or two poses which always looked a bit like, I don't want that. I don't want that pose. It just looks weird. So being able to choose the ones that you want, and then like, it looks like that axe has been bothered. Yeah, I don't want that. But thank you.
Yeah. No, I think that's the great thing, and because it's digital, because it's internet based. You can send files across the globe. I mean, most of my customers are either in the UK or in the US, but there's still quite a lot of them who are in Europe, and there's a smattering who are all over the place. They're in Peru and Australia. And,
Wow.
But, that's fine. And that's the great thing about it. There's no way we would ever have sent stuff to Peru. It would have cost a fortune.
Yeah.
It's bizarre to think of a miniature passing through the air, isn't it?
Yeah.
They're going through a cable. Well, going through a cable.
Yeah, that's
Like,
right.
It's bizarre, isn't it?
Somehow coming out as a... I mean, I reckon in another 5 or 10 years, there'll be a Mulinex something or other that'll be in your mum's kitchen.
Yeah.
And Jamie Oliver will be selling files for a funny thing that you need to make pasta. And, it's only $5.99.
Eventually get to the point you just be printing pasta.
Well, you can. Of course, that's the other thing about printing.
Printing food.
Is that the technology of printing is galloping along now. Our prints are used mostly SLA, which is stereolithography, and essentially what it is a photo receptive resin is exposed layer by layer, and that's what builds up the model.
Yeah.
But you can also use something called laser sintering, which is a technology which, not surprisingly, has got lasers in it, and it has a hopper with very, very fine metal powder. Could be silver, could be steel, could be gold, whatever you want. And the laser, the tiny little amount of this powder comes down, and the laser targets it and melts it.
Wow.
And it builds up a gold figure or a steel figure. And it can build things. And the fascinating thing about it now is that engineers are now able to design engineering components that you could never have made. If you think of a ball and socket joint, essentially you've got a ball that's captured in a socket, which, because it has to be engineered, comes in 2 parts.
Yeah.
The clamshell. You don't need to do that.
Yeah.
You can print the ball and the clasp in one. And there's a video on YouTube of them, and they printed for McDonnell Douglas, and it was a test piece of the undercarriage for one of their fighter jets. So this thing's about 5 or 6 feet long, and it was printed in one piece.
Wow.
But on a machine. But the guy takes it off the machine, and it's fully articulated. All the pistons, everything moves, and it's like just one single print.
Yeah.
And they can print in multimedia now, so you can print, you could print an electric plug, which has got the insulation and then the metal bits in it and the little bits of copper.
It's like Star Trek, isn't it?
It is, yeah. It's the replicator.
Yeah.
See, I only became aware of that because there's a guy at workshop, he printed out some like weird snake body thing for one of our colleagues, and it was all articulated. And I was like, "Oh, do you fit it all together?" He's like, "No, that's how it prints, but it all moves." And I was like,
Yeah.
"Hey,
Yeah.
it's just static, isn't it?" It's like, no, you can do all sorts. So, yeah, hearing that, and obviously metallic's been thrown in there as well.
Yeah, it's just it's the way it's going to go. I think I mean, you might even end up at a point where you go into like Element Games in Nottingham and say, "I need 20 Cadians."
Yeah.
Come by in 5 minutes.
Yeah.
And it'll just be done. Do you want them in silver? Do that for you.
It's like the old days of doing photos, wasn't it? Just take it to Kodak or whatever, come back in an hour, and it's all printed out.
It's all gallops along, so exciting times.
How hard did you find the leap from going from real world sculpting to?
It's hard. It's hard. I mean, the learning curve on the programs, if you don't have expert tuition, which is hugely expensive, by the way.
Yeah.
It's hard, to learn stuff. I mean, I use 2 or 3 different software suites, and I reckon I only use about 10% of them because the capabilities that are inside these programs are so huge. I know they're there, but I don't need them yet, And I suppose, if I get time and I can explore that, I can see things and I'll be able to say, I can do this now, or I can do that. And, when you suddenly you see another avenue. Yeah. And that's one of the exciting things about these programs is that they are growing. I'm using ZBrush now as one of them, and it is version 7, I think. And I started with version 1.2 in about 25 years ago.
Oh wow!
So it's grown, and it's a completely different animal now.
Yeah.
But they're so powerful, you know. I mean, ZBrush is what they used to make the models for Avatar.
Oh right, yeah.
You know, it's that level of capability is inside these programs. So
Yeah.
Madness.
it's just fabulous. I love it.
It's funny when you think about how far it's come now, and you think what it'll look like in 10 years' time. It's mind-boggling to think what wargaming will be then.
Yeah. Like, you know, you could imagine, I don't know, suppose you could put your Oculus goggles on, and you had some hand sensors. You could do your sculpting virtually. You know, you could just create the model, you know, bring it, and it's like that thing. And remember in Matrix, when the people are in the city and the big spaceships coming in, and you've got all the people who are like the air traffic controllers. They're all doing this. And that's where we're going. Yeah. And they're saying that's science fiction. It's not. No. It's probably about 3 or 4 years away.
That's it now. I think science fiction is only it feels to me increasingly like that. Science fiction is only ever like about 10 minutes ahead now, isn't it? You know, it's
well, hover police cars and hoverboards, we know are in science fiction when we have hover police cars and hoverboards.
Yeah.
that's fact.
That's right. and even when you look now at NASA and so on, are using sci-fi sources like Star Trek as inspiration for some of the things that they can do. Yeah. Because, you know, presumably Star Trek and Star Wars was informed by scientists who could say, well, you know, this might happen.
Yeah.
In 10 years' time, or that might happen in 50 years' time. So there's a timeline that has probably been accelerated.
Well, I think it's ridiculous how quickly I think we've surpassed science fiction. You know, I remember the first time taking a call on my iPhone watch.
Yes.
And that, you know, and that
was just thunder.
And it was back to like Dick Tracy, because he's getting Dick Tracy. And I thought, God, I've passed my own, you know, the science fiction of my childhood. I'm now past that. Yeah. You know, and I remember the first time you'd seen it looked like an iPad.
Yes.
Your data slate was in Star Trek, wasn't it? Yeah. You would go down, and the captain would go down into engineer, and the guy with the visor, you go, what's wrong? And he go, here, and he'd hand him an iPad. Yeah. And you go, wow, the idea it's a thing. Yeah. You know. You know,
I always thought as a kid when I watched Aliens.
And now 4-year-olds sit and use iPads, not the engineering team.
I know, do that.
Yeah. No, for me it was like when Ripley calls Carter, and it's like a telephone, video telephone call. I'm like, oh, that's sci-fi, isn't it? Whereas that's just like bog standard. Even your gran can work that. Right. So I've got a burning question about. So you used to, obviously you've done a lot of plastics as well, haven't you, over the years? So with sculpting for 3D, is there different sorts of, because obviously when you do plastic frames, you've got to consider undercuts and whatever. How does that work when it comes to 3D printing? Do you have to worry about any of that, or are there still
not so much? No, because the printer will print it in the rounds, you know. So if you want, you know, you can print things like there's a little figure here, and there's a hose coming out from the equipment here. There's no way if you're designing this for injection molding, you could do that. You're going to have to cut this figure up into several pieces and present it, each piece, into the mold. So the answer is that for SLA printing, you tend not to have to worry about that. Your only major things are bog standard stuff like, you know, are the ankles of the figure too thin? Are the guns too weak? Because on the screen, again, it's quite seductive. You know, when you're sculpting on the screen, you think, that gun looks great. Yeah. You know, and then when it's printed out, it looks a bit weedy. And realistically, it's okay. You know, if you measure it up, you think that makes perfect sense. But in this world of looking at figures from 3 feet away, you need a little bit of a cartoon effect, you know, to show that the gun is a gun. Yeah. You know, and it does this thing, and that's so you've got to make sure you bring that in. But in terms of production problems, not really.
Yeah, really. I suppose it's artistic license, isn't it? Because I'm like that when I'm doing like my painting and stuff. I push things a little bit more because in reality it wouldn't look like that. But for like you say 3 feet away, it makes sense for it to be like that. Yeah.
I mean, if you make a miniature pointing a gun and the gun is the scale it should be, 4 foot away, you can't tell whether that's a gloved hand or a pistol.
Yeah, that's right. Because all it is a tiny little rectangle on top of the hand.
Yeah, you have to. So you do have to have some sort of like has to be a bit of artistic license, isn't it? Really?
The other thing as well I think about in gaming is that most times, okay, here's some figures, they're not well printed, but these are pilot figures. So when you sell them and when people look at them, they look at them from the front.
Yeah.
And they think, oh, that's great. And then you buy the model and you paint it up and you put it on the table.
Yeah.
And you've spent hours doing it. And what do you look at?
Back.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And so I've always tried to, when I'm sculpting figures, try to give some interest, some reward for the poor schmuck who owns the model to look at, so that he's got something that he can recognise. So it's a simple thing, but it's the functionality of the model on the table as a gaming piece. As if it was chess. Yeah. You've got to be understood exactly what that figure is. Yeah. And if you haven't done that, you've kind of failed.
No. I mean, I most of the time I usually see the backs of my army, but inevitably, because I'm not very good at gaming, they do start towards me. So I do normally return
the best view of my miniatures is normally when they're on the table next to the bit where they should actually be after they've been taken off hand over fist.
Casualties.
Yeah.
So what's Bob's next journey then? What's he currently working on?
Well, at the moment,
as if you're not
doing. No, I'm doing all sorts of things. I've got this one here that's coming out in.
That's cool.
It's so good.
In January, I think. Wow. So this is a kit, and I mean, if I can print this, anybody can print this. So that's coming out on Patreon, and then it comes out on the website 1 month later.
Gives the leagues a vote on a run for its money. That does it.
Yeah, it's bulky. I mean, I was even thinking I looked at that, and it gave me like the Ash Wastes, the new Necromunda vehicles. And like vibes to that, so I'm like,
But again, I'm trying to make it as generic as possible.
Yeah, it's nice.
I've got another vehicle. I've got a big, like a kind of science fiction, like a near future Huey that I've done.
All right, cool. Now you're talking my language. Now, say helicopters.
It's about that size, and with the rotors on, it'll be about 16 inches long.
Wow.
So there's a lot of printing in it, but. It'll be there. It'll be out again in June. No, that's out now. This one's out now. The helicopter will be out next month. It'll be out in January. And then I've got a couple of other things lined up, more vehicles, more spaceships. I love making spaceships.
Yeah, I can tell.
And you're doing a good job of them, to be fair. No wonder.
I mean, I like what you said before we went live, actually, which was like you tread the line of generic sci-fi, not trying to go down one vein too much. Yeah. And I think it works really well, because I was looking at that and I'm getting vibes of Avatar and like Firefly, but also Aliens. But it's none of them.
It could be anything.
But it gives a vibe of them as well, which I think is really nice. That if you wanted like a dropship from Aliens, but can't afford to get their plastic one that is no longer available, then you can print this out.
So like this thing here, I think that's about. I think I've got an Elegoo Mars printer. Now, I know now, because I looked on Facebook, you can buy it for $119.
Wow. It's madness.
And
that's dollars, not quid.
That's dollars. So even if it translates to quid, it's still £120 UK.
Yeah.
You can buy a pint of the resin, and you probably get most of this ship out of that pint for about £29.
Wow.
So for about, say, £150, you could print this. You've still got the printer.
Yeah.
And you can just keep going and print, and you can print more of them.
Yeah.
You
could have a fleet.
You could have a fleet of them.
Yeah, because you imagine, how much that would cost you from Forge World.
Well, yeah, I mean, just anywhere, not even Forge World. I mean, you got like all sorts of companies out there.
It does. I mean, I've often thought, why doesn't Workshop do this? And I think there must be a whole raft of IP, intellectual property issues surrounding it that would stop them, because we all know that out there are people who are accessing files to make things that are stand-ins for lots of figures.
Yeah.
And I can't imagine that Workshop aren't thinking about some way to get around this
The thing I always found really weird was back in the day when, I mean, you probably observed this as well, was Forge World did all the stuff that Workshop couldn't do in plastic.
Mm-hmm.
And they used to do like extra doors and things for rhinos and races. Then, as much as I love Forge World, I love the stuff they're making, it's become almost like a second miniatures department now, as opposed to fulfilling all those things. Because all I want, and I know it didn't take Daz that long to make the Genestealer Cult head sprue, I just want different head sprues for all the Imperial Guard regiments.
Yeah.
I want different banners, different weapon options and stuff like that, so I don't have to have this particular carbine or this particular lasgun. I can have this head with that gun. And I thought that was what Forge World's job was, but apparently not anymore. So.
No, it's interesting. But I think that if Workshop got to this, I think it would be amazing.
It's sad, isn't it? Because I think you've got the two issues going on here with what you're saying is the fact that Forge World are no longer allowing you to make your armies more colourful like they used to. And then at the same point in time, and I understand it, but it feels like it's very much limiting what you can do if you are somebody who does want to be on the tournament scene. Is this thing you go, we aren't going to make weird and wonderful heads anymore and shields and guns and whatever and swords, but we're not going to let you buy them from anywhere else either.
Yes.
It will penalise you if you come. And you go and you think, and you're going, well, now you've left me with just such a small avenue of places to be able to pick things up. I have to start, like you do, digging into old Warhammer and digging into Age of Sigmar, and you're not necessarily going to have the thing you want, And it's it's like I get it where they're trying to keep their things for themselves as they should be, but same point in time, we all have more imagination than that.
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing: what they could do is not beyond the wit of man to have a Games Workshop 3D printer with lessons from one of these people, and works online. So you, instead of putting a USB stick in with the file to print it that you've downloaded, you plug it into the internet. You buy the file. It sends it to your printer, and then it prints.
Yeah.
So
and you don't own the file.
Don't own the file. You've never seen the file. It's never been on a stick. That's the kind of thing that maybe.
Because the thing is, it's not like they would. They're not then taking up any space, are they? No. They're not. They're going, oh well, we thought these heads were going to be really popular. We've got 150 million of them, and no one's buying them.
Yeah. No.
If it exists in inside a PC.
And if every Games Workshop store, every Warhammer store had a bank of 6 or 12 printers that were Games Workshop printers, then people could just come in like it was Argos. And just say, have you got a 2532W? And say, yes, sir. Click. And you could just how many do you want?
Yeah.
And that
idea.
Go and have a coffee and a cake and come back.
I mean, that's how we used to do it in One World. It's like people would come and do their Forge World orders.
I remember being one of those people.
Yes.
And you'd be like, we have our pickups at 12, like 3 and 5 o'clock.
Mm-hmm.
So I used to love the excitement of knowing that something was being literally handpicked for me.
Yeah.
Or the fact that you could, if you ordered something out of the little catalogue and they didn't have it, someone would actually say, we'll cast it for you, but you'll need to come back next, or we'll send it out. Or, to be able to just...
like with your claret glass, like, okay.
I just used to go with the smoking jacket on purposely just for that occasion. But, you used to have that, because you used to go into Warhammer World, and it had a big catalogue, like Argos, and you just went, I'll have them, and them.
Yeah.
I've done it many times. If anything, it became a bit obsessional of going, I want just that pointing arm, or that head with with that thing over one eye. And it's sad that that's gone. It really is.
So Pat, we have some Patreon questions. Is that correct? Just go quick fire some questions out. Right, there's only 3, so you won't be too stressing.
So Robert Sharp asks, I think we might have covered this a little bit. It would be interesting to hear Bob's take on the use of CAD in mini design. Was he involved in the shift from physical to digital sculpting at GW? How difficult is it to move from one medium to the other?
Okay, on the CAD issue, they didn't start doing it properly at Workshop until after I left, because the plastic production chain I was used to at that time was very much real-world sculpting. So you were making a 3-to-1 master and then passing it on for pantography. So that's the answer to that one. Is the transmission, sorry about the last part of that question?
How difficult is it to move from one medium to another? So moving to digital, which
it's not. It's two completely different things. So it's not a case of transferring your skills beyond basic things like anatomy and posing and understanding how weapons work. Everything else is like relearning, you know.
Yeah.
Because you know there is no real transmission. As we spoke earlier on, if you had a matrix type sculpting program, that might do it, but I'm not aware of anything right now that does it. You still have to sit with a mouse and a keyboard or a pad and do all your stuff there. So it's oranges and apples, I'm afraid.
Yeah.
So the original Space Marine that you made, was that 3 times bigger?
No, it was 1-to-1. Yeah. The actual, I've got some. In fact, I've got. Just before I left Games Workshop, there was the start of the exercise to try to create a history of what the Space Marines were like, how they developed, how we got to the Mark 5 or the Mark 6. What did Mark 4 look like, Mark 3, and so on. So I did a set of drawings, which I only discovered in the attic about 3 months ago.
Yeah.
And I've passed them on to Workshop, so they've now got them in their archive, so that's good. But I think somewhere in my shed, I've got some greens, which were sculpts of like the Mark 2, Mark 3, which was an earlier version. So I've still got them. I'll have to look them out. And if we do this again, stick them in front of the camera.
It'd be lovely to see it.
Well, look, it's never been pressed. So
wow.
It's never been moulded.
Okay. Secrets.
Next question, middle one. Roland Lucas says, love to know what prompted the shift from metal to plastic minis and his take on the pros and cons of
Oh, well, the thing was raw finance. To make a vulcanized rubber mold that can carry, say, 12 or 15 cavities in it for making models would cost then, I don't know, £50 to make that. And you could spin that mould for maybe 200 spins or 300 spins before the temperature of the metal and any of the little undercuts destroyed the mould and destroyed the detail. So that's the basic cost of making metal figures. Making plastic figures, you would have to spend £5,000 or £10,000 or £15,000 to make a mould, which was engineered by craftsmen and then put into a huge machine the size of half a house, and would then quite happily run that mould more or less ad infinitum, really, and would just produce figures. And the actual raw cost for plastic was tiny compared to the cost of a model. I can't remember. I think at one point we were paying about £3,000 or £5,000 per metric ton for metal, and you could buy a ton of plastic for about £800.
Okay.
Oh yeah.
So that was those are where the economies came in.
Fantastic. And our final question from Josh Lee says, Bob has produced such a big range of sci-fi sculpts recently that seem to be from a wide variety of subgenres. Where does he get his inspiration from? Playing different miniature games? Other mediums? Also, what games has he freelanced on since leaving Games Workshop?
Well, we know the quickie game.
Right. Okay, so we were speaking earlier on, and I like the idea that as I said, my stuff is kind of like generic sci-fi. So it's kind of like going to Lidl
Yeah.
You know, you get
that's an analogy I thought it was.
No, it's like you get you won't get McVitie's digestives. Of course you wouldn't, but you'll get McSquirty's digestives.
I don't want any of that.
So basically, what I'm trying to do is offer a wide selection of components that people can use in their games. In my mind, what's happening is you've got a gaming session next week, and it involves a fight in a bazaar. And you're like, how the hell am I going to populate my table like that? So you'd look up, market stalls, STLs, and I've got a set of market stalls, so you could download them, print them off, slap some paint on them, and they're good to go. And then I've also got things like, if you were in a spaceship hangar, or you were looking for a giant landing strut that looks like it's come from a spaceship, but it's the size of your table, so just to establish that that's where the spaceship is. Those kind of things. These are all parts and props that can be used in lots of other games. That's why most of my figures are human. Most of them are people who have got a job to do. They're either fixing something, or they're trying to sell you something, or they're running away, or their kids being naughty, so that they're all those little things that you like to have in your game that add pepper and spice into the game.
Well, you must be the only man the only man out there who is actually making bar staff.
Yeah.
in a large
somebody
numbers.
Has to.
I know there's always some in D&D and something. There's always a big buxom sort of looking wedge behind the bar, or the guy behind the bar looks like he used to fight and he's got massive big forearms. But you do like a whole range of sci-fi bar stuff.
Yeah, I've got bar stuff. Yeah, bar stuff. In fact, I'm not sure I've released them. I've got some that are like some guys sitting down drinking. Look like they've had too much.
This
it's Bob Naismith for all your pub drunk
needs.
I mean, I made my own game ages ago. I was telling Dave about it, and we played a game, and it was a mix between Battlefleet Gothic, where you had like ship battles, and then you had like actual on the ship itself, like border actions.
Yes.
And knowing now that there's all those things exist that I could populate my ship with, it makes me so happy.
One of the things I've got to do is make more sense on my website, because it's not immediately apparent that all these things are there. So I will have to redesign the front end of it so that it's more easy for people to understand. What is there.
To reiterate on the last Patreon question, what was the last sort of bit of sci-fi you watched where it's really triggered you and you thought, there's some stuff in there that's really got...
I really enjoyed Andor. I thought that was really good, really well made, kind of quite gritty. There was very little magic. Just like proper, just people doing...
Yeah, it was very nuts and bolts, wasn't it?
Yeah, I like that. I like The Expanse.
Yeah, Expanse is really good.
Yeah. Various sci-fi movies that have cropped up in, Netflix and now and Disney and all that sort of thing. So they're all grist for the mill, But also, I've got to say things like, I don't know, Terminator, or the workshop thing is nothing more or less than an amalgam of all these things.
Yeah, absolutely.
Anyway, presented in a specific way. So really all I'm doing is looking at pretty much the same kind of material, but presenting it in a different way.
Yeah.
So it's not there's a controversy at the moment about Space Marines.
Yes.
And you were there back in the day, and I'm not going to ask you to take a stance on one side or the next. I'm not going to do that to you.
Edge of me seat.
Oh, yeah. So there's this thing that should Space Marines be female? And there's a whole thing out there where no, they shouldn't, yes, they should. And there's arguments.
Mm-hmm.
I remember seeing Alan Merritt put out a post that we made female space.
Yeah, I've seen photos.
Yeah.
Two of them.
Were you part of that at the time? Or was that
I think Trish made some for us. We were doing them as, I think, because we'd been doing villagers and things like that for fantasy, we wanted to do some sci-fi ones, and I'm pretty sure we did some females. I think maybe Ali did some as well.
Yeah.
I don't remember I did many. We touched on this earlier on that, you know, I believe that science fiction stuff has to have some realism, some basic physics in it, you know, and the basic physics would mean that a person, man or woman, who's wearing a spacesuit is wearing a spacesuit.
Yeah.
You know, and what's going on the inside is
irrelevant.
Really.
Yeah.
You know, so no, I think it's a good thing. You know, definitely.
Cool.
Yeah.
That's what. Just want to chill that in there because I was made aware of it ages ago. Like,
Yeah, I've seen them.
But I do fight shy of I do fight shy of bearing flesh for no particular reason.
well, being a red-blooded male, I do like to see a little bit of flesh from time to time. But when you were showing me your space ladies in their spacesuits, they look tasteful and look cool.
Yeah,
So,
they're not.
big
Yeah, there's
fan of
nothing. Yeah, your granny would be all right. She'd
Yeah.
look at them. That's all right.
It's not Barbarella, is it?
No. Ooh, Barbarella.
Oh,
That's a flashback.
Yeah, sorry. Why they should remake it, actually, don't you think?
I think it was heard it was being circled potentially.
Really?
Really? Barbarella.
Yeah.
That's insane.
I don't know whether I think some of that. I don't know whether you can recreate some of that 60s
Who would
kick.
be Duran? That's why
I always forget that's where that name comes from.
Yeah, that's right. He was the mad scientist guy, wasn't he? Yeah.
Oh, so, with regards to what you're making at the moment,
Yes.
you've said you've got the near future Chopper is out next year.
Yes.
Is that going to be? Will that be connected to a particular arm of military, or will it be generic? Like,
Well, the crew, there is a crew for it, and the crew are the Overrunners, which are the kind of near future infantry
yeah,
that I've got. So I've done several poses for them that will be in that.
well, the
That's
poses
it.
for them, having them sitting inside, it's sort of thing. Oh, that's
Manning the guns. I mean, it's a Huey, so it's going to have to. There's big machine guns at the side.
yeah.
Stein giving it. So they'll be there. You know.
Have you thought about would you consider doing a team to be able to sit in it, waiting to go sort of?
Yeah, you could do. Yeah, I've got plenty of seated models, so I could chuck some into the set. You know.
Excellent. Look at the seats in this one, isn't it? It's got some nice seats in it.
We could easily do that. It's not a problem. Yeah.
Well, I don't know if I've got anything else to
Well,
watch.
the other thing you mentioned before you started it, you've got a figure that might be a celebration of you coming on here.
Yes.
As an STL, potentially.
There's a set of figures that I haven't released yet, which what I call the Gallia, and they are a revisit, if you like, of like your standard heavily armoured space warriors, but with a Roman flavour. And I've got a whole load of infantry models and so on. But I've got the commander here, which is this fella, and there's going to be pictures of him up, and presumably there'll be access to that file, and you can have that as a free download if you have a printer or a friend who's got one. And also this thing called the Lupus, sorry. And again, that's the big droid thing. This is a test print. I personally think it's a bit small, or wee, as they say. And if you see it against the model, you can see that it's just, I don't think it's imposing enough. So I
Bigger thigh.
like to see it needs to be up about here. So I'll redo that as a kit. So the one that's on the file link at the moment is for this fella. But I think what I'll do is chop him up a bit and make him bigger. So yeah, you're welcome to have those.
That's extremely kind. Thank you. On behalf of our listeners.
Yeah.
I'd love to call the Commander Christmas bonus. Just feels right.
Chris, Matt. Yeah, why not? Yeah.
Sounds appropriate from the start of it.
Just fun. It's all, that's the thing, isn't it? You know, here we are having a good time, having some chocolate biscuits and coffee, and talking about fiddling about on a table with little toy soldiers.
Nothing better in life.
That's right. You know, we're not doing any harm.
Absolutely right. And it goes back to where we started, doesn't it? And we all take our own version of it away from it, don't we? And that's a very nice thing about it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I'm just leaving this, realising that you've not only had an impact on my child, my sisters as well. Like
Yes.
Yeah. My brother's playing that cricket game, and my dad. So, and all the corgi cars that we've just played.
I just think
It's insane.
You being such a big Bond fan, the fact that he sculpted an odd job as
And there was the other question was the one about any other lines that I worked on. I worked on Iron Crown, did spaceship game called Silent Death.
Whatever.
Do you remember?
Oh, no, I don't know that one.
Okay, so I did all the spaceships for that. There was a role-playing game called Trinity.
No, I didn't.
Which was a kind of like Scandi noir type dark sci-fi.
Yeah.
I did some models for that. Historically, I've done loads of stuff for people like Victrix.
Oh, them I know. Yeah. Some of the
Dripping Beast.
lovely.
What did you do for Victrix? Because I've literally bought nearly everything.
Most of the early stuff, because they moved away and use another sculptor now.
Did you do the British Centre and line companies and stuff like that?
Yes.
Good.
Yeah.
Oh,
And
I use those all the. Oh yeah, good. I use them all the time.
just about the time when they were starting the cavalries when I stopped out. But yeah, Victrix stuff was good. Dripping Beast.
yeah, them
I
as well.
Do lots of fun and wacky stuff for Russ Dunaway over at Old Glory in the
Yes.
States.
Yeah.
He's going through a kind of the Wars of Oz, which is a great idea. So it's like wargaming, but with Wizards of Oz stuff. So
Sounds awesome.
yeah, and it's just wacky. But yeah, that's good fun. And yeah, there's loads of odd little games like that I've been lucky enough to get involved with, and it's great. And the other thing I love is, as a freelance, you are cheaper. You know, you don't have to, if you want to set up a toy soldier business or a game business, and you don't want to hire any more people than you absolutely have to, you can hire the services of someone like me, and that means that very often you get in at the ground floor when there's a new game.
Yeah.
And that's exciting because you know, you're speaking to the creators, you know, you get a chance to have some input. You can moderate it a wee bit if you feel that it needs it. So that's really good, you know. So I love being a freelance, and I love doing this stuff. I love doing this kind of sci-fi, my Patreon and website, because no one else can tell me what to do.
No, I could see you love it.
Wacky stuff I can, and I want to just make dead down the line stuff. You know, I made this. This is Dave Woods, who's a really talented painter I spoke about earlier on. He said, oh, he's into the near future stuff. He said, why don't you do a little vehicle, like almost like a buggy thing? So I should have brought it, but I've got a little car. It's a dead basic little car thing for the infantry for carrying stuff, and he wanted a trailer, so I've done this trailer.
That's cool.
And yeah, but it's do you know what? It's just really practical, you know, and you could just see it being used in many places, and yeah, that's why I like being unbound. You know, you can just do whatever blooming out you like.
I think what I've taken away from this ultimately, Bob, is that you've been doing this a really long time, and I really appreciate is that your passion for it is still
there.
It's still so strong, and which amazes me to be doing it for as long as you have, and still be thinking so with so many new lines and so many new ideas, and to still love it so much. I think it's amazing, really.
Yeah, good. Yeah, well, it's if other people are enjoying it, that's great. You know, and it's just nice to just do something that, as I said, doesn't hurt anybody, doesn't, you know, it adds to people's lives. You know, I always think the big question is, are you making the world a better place or a worse place? You know, and if you're doing something like this, you can really only be making it better, can't you?
Well, it's not real. It's not going to hurt anyone, is it? So,
I think that's, if you're making things for better and you're making people happy, I think that's, I can't think of anything else to say to add to it.
No.
I think that's a perfect way to potentially end it.
Well, yes, I mean, I thank you again for coming on the show. Thank you for spending time talking to us and showing us all the stuff as well.
I've learned so much. I'm blown away. I've got to be honest, I know 3D printing a little bit, but to see how good it is, especially with such wonderful things you've sculpted, Bob, thank you for coming on.
No worries, my pleasure.
It's really been real pleasure. Thank you so much.
I don't know when this is coming out, but if it comes out before Christmas, Merry Christmas. Sure, everybody.
Yeah, it should be out before
Well, there
Christmas.
you are then.
Thank you very much.
All the best. All right, cheers, guys.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.